My name is Beverly, I'm 38 years old, and I was standing in my Fortune 500 CEO office when my phone buzzed with a text that made my blood run cold. Beverly, darling, it's Mom. Saw you in Forbes. So proud. 15 years of silence shattered by 11 words from the woman who declared me dead at 23. I remember that night perfectly, choosing my career over marrying Richard Sterling, their 45-year-old family friend with wandering hands and whiskey breath. My father's exact words still echo, "You're no daughter of mine." Now suddenly I exist again? The rage that built my empire ignited fresh. Before we dive into how I transformed from discarded daughter to billionaire CEO, tell me where you're watching from today? If my story of family betrayal and ultimate triumph resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of people who turned their deepest wounds into their greatest weapons. Because what you're about to hear isn't just about revenge, it's about the price of choosing yourself when everyone you love demands you choose them. The spring of my 23rd year should have been perfect. I'd just graduated with my MBA from Wharton, top of my class, with a coveted offer from McKinsey Consulting burning a hole in my pocket. I remember bursting through the mahogany doors of my parents' Connecticut estate, ready to share my triumph with the people who'd pushed me toward excellence my entire life. Instead, I found them in the formal living room with Richard Sterling, papers spread across the antique coffee table like a business transaction. Which, I suppose, I was. "Sit down, Beverly," my father commanded in that voice he used for hostile takeovers. "Richard has generously agreed to overlook your educational pursuits. The wedding will be in August." I stood there, diploma still clutched in my hands, watching my mother arrange sugar cookies on china plates as if we were discussing garden parties instead of selling her daughter. Richard's eyes traveled over me like I was real estate he was appraising, and I knew then that accepting meant death of a different kind. "I have a job offer in New York," I said quietly. The temperature in the room plummeted 10 degrees. My father's face turned that particular shade of purple I'd only seen during failed business deals. "Then you're no daughter of mine. Consider yourself dead to this family." The words hung in the air like a noose. My mother's hands never stopped arranging those perfect cookies, but I caught the slight tremor as she spoke without meeting my eyes. "Your father's right, Beverly. If you walk out that door, don't ever come back." The next hour remains a blur of calculated cruelty. Nathan, my 21-year-old brother home from Yale, stood in the hallway as our mother removed every photograph of me from the walls. "Don't," I begged him, but he just shook his head and looked away. Melissa, 19 and still naive enough to cry, hugged me in my childhood bedroom as I threw essentials into a bag. "I have to stay," she whispered. "You understand, right? I can't lose them too." Even now, I wonder if she meant losing our parents or losing the trust fund that paid for her art school dreams. By sunset, I was standing on the sidewalk watching my father's security escort me off the property like a common criminal. 23 years of birthdays, Christmases, family vacations to Martha's Vineyard reduced to a duffel bag and a banker's box of personal items. The last thing I saw was my mother's silhouette in the window, backlit like a ghost, before the curtains closed forever. The Greenwich train station became my first office. I sat on a bench counting my savings, $3,200 to build a life from scratch. The McKinsey offer required appropriate business attire I could no longer afford, professional headshots with a family name that now meant nothing, references from a father who'd erased me. I called the recruiting partner from a payphone, my voice steady as steel. "I'll need to start immediately. And I'll need an advance on my signing bonus." Those first months, I lived like a refugee in my own country. The studio apartment in Queens had cockroaches that scattered when I turned on the lights and pipes that groaned like dying animals. I wore the same 2 suits in rotation, washing them in the sink and hanging them to dry over the shower rod. Breakfast was black coffee, lunch was skipped, dinner was ramen with an egg if I was celebrating. I slept on an air mattress that deflated slowly each night, waking up on the floor like a metaphor for my life. The office became my real home. First in, last out, I lived for the approving nods from partners who didn't know I was showering in the gym because my apartment had no hot water. When colleagues shared stories about weekend family gatherings, I invented elaborate lies about parents traveling abroad, siblings too busy with their own lives. "You're so independent," they'd say admiringly, not knowing independence was just another word for abandoned. My first promotion came 8 months later. Junior analyst to senior analyst, a 10% raise that meant everything and nothing. I celebrated alone at my desk with Chinese takeout, staring at my new business cards. Beverly Chen, senior analyst. No middle name, no family legacy, just me. The fortune cookies message mocked me. Family is life's greatest treasure. I threw it in the trash and worked until 3 a.m. on a client presentation that would make them forget I was just 24 and utterly alone. But loneliness became fuel. Every 100-hour week was a middle finger to parents who thought I'd come crawling back. Every successful project was proof that Beverly Sterling had been worth more than a marriage contract. I learned to navigate office politics with the same ruthlessness my father taught me at the dinner table, only I used it to build rather than destroy. By my second year, I was managing projects for Fortune 100 clients. By my third, I was the youngest person ever promoted to engagement manager. Still, success felt hollow when there was no one to share it with. I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to call Nathan, to tell him about landing the pharmaceutical giant account, only to remember his silence was complicity. Once, I saw Melissa's art show advertised in the Times and stood outside the gallery like a stalker, watching her laugh with our parents through the window. My mother wore the same pearl necklace she'd worn the day she removed my pictures. I wondered if she'd replaced them with landscapes, or if the walls just stayed empty, monuments to obedience. The universe tested my resolve at my grandfather's funeral 3 years after the exile. His lawyer called, voice careful and professional. "Your grandfather left you something. The family has requested you receive it privately, before the service." I knew what that meant: come early, take your inheritance, disappear before the mourners arrive. I almost didn't go. But Grandpa Joe had been the only one who'd ever seen me as more than a merger opportunity, and I owed him one last goodbye. The funeral home smelled like lilies and lies. My parents stood near the casket like sentinels, my father's jaw clenched so tight I thought it might shatter. Nathan had filled out, looking more like our father every day. Melissa clutched a tissue, her engagement ring catching the light. The diamond was massive, ostentatious, exactly what our mother would have chosen. No one spoke to me. I signed the papers the lawyer presented, inherited Grandpa's vintage Rolex and a letter I wouldn't open for years, and turned to leave. "Beverly?" My mother's voice stopped me at the door. For one moment, hope flared like a match in the dark. But when I turned, her face was stone. "Use the back exit. We don't want to confuse the guests." The match extinguished. I left through the delivery entrance, past dumpsters and loading docks, a fitting exit for the family trash. That night, I sat in my marginally better apartment, Grandpa's watch heavy on my wrist, and made a promise. They wanted me dead? Fine. Beverly Sterling was dead. But Beverly Chen was very much alive, and she was going to build an empire so vast that one day, when they finally saw what their discarded daughter had become, the regret would eat them alive. I just had no idea how many more betrayals I'd have to survive before that day came. By 28, I had become everything my family said I'd never be without them. McKinsey's youngest vice president in the New York office, I commanded a team of 50 and a salary that would have made my father choke on his brandy. The girl who'd slept on deflating air mattresses now owned a 2-bedroom condo on the Upper East Side with a view of Central Park. Success should have felt like vindication, but most nights I still ate dinner alone, my mother's voice echoing, "Use the back exit." Then James Chen entered my life like sunshine through storm clouds. We met at a client dinner, both of us the only Asian faces in a sea of gray suits and old money. He was a director at Goldman Sachs, brilliant and ambitious with a smile that made me forget I'd trained myself not to trust. "Chen's not your real name, is it?" he asked on our third date, fingers intertwined with mine across a candlelit table. "It is now," I replied, and he never asked again. That should have been my first warning sign. Katie Williams became my second chance at family. A fellow VP who'd clawed her way up from rural Alabama, she understood reinvention. We bonded over late-night strategy sessions and war stories of being underestimated. She was the one who held my hair back when I got food poisoning before a board presentation, who convinced me to take my first vacation in 5 years, who listened without judgment when wine loosened my tongue about the family I'd lost. "Blood doesn't mean anything," she'd say fiercely. "We're sisters by choice." My career trajectory looked like a hockey stick graph. I pioneered a new consulting framework that saved our pharmaceutical client $200 million in the first year. Tech companies started requesting me by name. I was speaking at Wharton, Harvard Business School, my face on the cover of Consulting magazine under the headline "The Future is Female." Part of me wondered if my parents had seen it, if my mother kept a copy hidden in a drawer somewhere. The other part reminded me I was supposed to be dead to them. The promotion to senior vice president seemed inevitable. Harold Morrison, the managing partner who'd mentored me since my analyst days, practically promised it over drinks. "You're my successor, Beverly," he said, patting my hand paternally. "I've been grooming you for this. The announcement's just a formality." I believed him because I needed to believe someone in power could see my worth without a family name attached. The Monday of the announcement, I wore my best suit and Grandpa's watch for luck. The conference room filled with the usual suspects, but Harold's smile seemed different, sharper somehow. "I'm pleased to announce our new senior vice president," he began, and I straightened my spine, ready for the moment 5 years of 100-hour weeks had earned. "Thomas Morrison, who brings fresh perspective from our London office." Thomas Morrison. Harold's nephew. Fresh from a mediocre stint abroad, now leapfrogging over me into the position I'd bled for. The room spun as polite applause thundered in my ears. Katie squeezed my hand under the table, but her grip felt strange, almost guilty. I maintained my composure through the meeting, even managed to shake Thomas's soft hand and offer congratulations that tasted like glass. Harold found me in my office that evening, packing up to leave early for the first time in years. "Beverly, you understand, don't you? Thomas needs seasoning, and who better to learn from than you? Consider it a compliment that you'll be training your future peer." Future peer. Not superior. Never superior. The subtext was clear: you've risen as far as a woman with no connections can rise. But the real betrayal came later, in Harold's office after hours when I thought I was alone. I'd returned for my laptop, forgotten in my haste to escape, and heard voices through his cracked door. "The Chin girl actually thought she had a chance," Harold laughed, and my blood froze. As if I'd hand senior leadership to someone whose own family disowned her. Thank God James has been keeping me informed about her instabilities. James. My James. The one person I'd trusted with pieces of my story. I pressed against the wall, willing myself invisible as Harold continued. "And Katie? Worth every penny to keep tabs on her. Though I think the poor thing actually started caring." Katie's voice came next, soft and ashamed but still participating. "She works hard. Maybe too hard. Classic overcompensation for abandonment issues." The floor beneath me shifted, reality rearranging into new, uglier patterns. Every dinner with James where he'd asked about my work suddenly seemed like intelligence gathering. Katie's convenient friendship, always there to listen, to remember details, to report back. Even my success had been orchestrated, managed, contained within boundaries I hadn't known existed. I don't remember leaving the building or how I got home. I do remember sitting on my bathroom floor at 3 a.m., throwing up rage and betrayal while my phone buzzed with worried texts from the two people I'd trusted most. "James, where are you, babe? Getting worried. Katie, drinks tomorrow to celebrate your inevitable next win?" The resignation letter wrote itself. Clean, professional, giving 2 weeks' notice I had no intention of serving. I included a flash drive containing every innovation I'd created, every framework that bore my fingerprints, making it clear the intellectual property left with me. Harold's face when he read it was almost worth the devastation. "You can't be serious. After everything I've done for you?" The audacity of abusers, always painting themselves as benefactors. "Everything you've done?" I kept my voice level, though my hands shook. "You mean stealing my ideas while having your nephew's girlfriend pretend to be my friend?" "Oh yes, Katie told me everything." She hadn't, but his flinch confirmed what I'd suspected. They'd all been in on it, a coordinated effort to mine my brilliance while ensuring I never threatened the real hierarchy. James showed up at my apartment that night with flowers and lies. "Whatever you think you heard, you're wrong. I love you, Beverly." But I'd learned to recognize the smooth delivery of someone reciting lines. "Did Harold pay you directly, or was it more of a quid pro quo situation?" His mask slipped for just a second, but that second was enough. The flowers ended up in the trash with his spare key. Katie's betrayal cut deeper because I'd let her see me vulnerable. Her tearful voicemail claimed she'd meant to tell me that it had started as a favor to Harold but became real friendship. Maybe that was true. Maybe she'd cried genuine tears at my stories of family rejection while filing reports about my weaknesses. It didn't matter. Trust, once shattered, leaves shards that draw blood no matter how you try to piece them together. Within a month, I'd incorporated Sterling Innovations, choosing the name like a battle flag. Let them all remember whose daughter they'd underestimated. My non-compete clause had enough loopholes to drive a truck through, thanks to a lawyer who specialized in corporate revenge. The settlement from McKinsey, once they realized I could prove Harold's pattern of discrimination, funded my first 6 months of operations. The business plan wrote itself in fury and clarity. If traditional consulting rewarded connections over competence, I'd build something that made connections irrelevant. Pure meritocracy, transparent processes, innovations that spoke louder than last names. I'd create the company I'd wished existed when I was 23 and homeless with an MBA, when I was 28 and betrayed by mentors who saw me as a resource to exploit. But first, I sat in my empty apartment, boxes packed for a smaller place to conserve startup capital, and let myself mourn. Not just James and Katie and Harold, but the fantasy that professional success could replace personal connections. I'd traded one family's betrayal for another, corporate edition. The lesson was clear: the only person I could trust was myself. Everyone else was just a potential enemy waiting for the right price to turn. The next morning, I founded my company with a promise. No more mentors, no more best friends, no more lovers with access to my vulnerabilities. Sterling Innovations would succeed because I'd learned the hard way that every hand extended in friendship might hold a knife. My parents had taught me that blood meant nothing. Harold, James, and Katie had taught me that chosen family was just as dangerous. Fine. I'd build an empire in perfect isolation, and when I reached the top, I'd have no one to thank but myself. The girl who'd once believed in loyalty was as dead as the daughter my parents had buried. What remained was pure ambition wrapped in designer suits and defensive walls so high that no betrayal could ever scale them again. Or so I thought. At 32, I thought I'd learned every possible way to be betrayed. Sterling Innovations occupied 3 floors of a Manhattan high-rise, our logo gleaming in brushed steel like armor against the world. I'd built something untouchable, or so I believed, recruiting brilliant minds who understood that excellence trumped connections. My employees weren't family, they were fellow warriors in the battle against nepotism and old boys networks. We shared purpose, not personal stories, and I kept it that way. The company culture reflected my hard-won lessons. Transparent salary bands, blind resume reviews, promotions based purely on deliverables. I hired the overlooked and underestimated, the ones with thick accents and state school degrees, the single mothers and reformed addicts who just needed someone to see their potential. They called me tough but fair, distant but dependable. None of them knew I ate lunch alone in my office not from arrogance but from practice, that my emotional walls were load-bearing structures holding up everything I'd built. Our breakthrough came with the Yamamoto account, a Japanese tech giant looking to enter American markets. Every major firm had pitched and failed, unable to bridge the cultural divide. But I'd spent years as an outsider studying insiders, learning to speak languages beyond words. My team and I crafted a strategy that honored both innovation and tradition, and when old Mr. Yamamoto himself flew in for the final presentation, he bowed deeper to me than to his own executives. "You understand what it means to build from nothing," he said quietly after signing our largest contract to date. Success bred expansion. 50 employees became 100 became 200. We poached talent from McKinsey, from Bain, from Boston Consulting Group, including several people who'd watched my humiliation and chose my leadership over Harold's legacy. Revenue doubled annually. Forbes featured us in Disruptors to Watch. I started getting calls from PE firms sniffing around acquisition opportunities, all politely declined. Sterling Innovations wasn't for sale at any price. It was proof that I didn't need anyone's validation to matter. The sabotage started subtly, almost like bad luck. A key algorithm we developed for predictive market analysis, worth millions in competitive advantage, appeared mysteriously in a competitor's presentation. Our chief technology officer swore our systems were secure, ran every diagnostic possible. I hired external cybersecurity experts who found nothing. Then came the client defection, Yamamoto's American subsidiary pulling out overnight, citing strategic realignment, their explanation as hollow as my parents' love. An anonymous complaint triggered the IRS audit next, alleging financial irregularities that didn't exist but required months of document production and legal fees to disprove. Every week brought new catastrophes. Our top data scientist poached by a company that shouldn't have known she existed, 3 more key employees following, our primary business checking account frozen due to suspicious activity that turned out to be normal international transfers. Death by 1,000 cuts, each precisely placed to bleed us slowly. The private investigator cost money I couldn't spare, but paranoia demanded answers. She was good, former FBI with contacts in all the right shadows. 2 weeks later, she sat in my office with a folder that made my coffee taste like ash. The shell company orchestrating these attacks traces back through 7 layers of ownership. But the beneficial owner is Richard Sterling. She slid photographs across my desk, Richard at 60, heavier but still wearing predator's eyes, now married to my cousin Diane. Of course. Even in rejection, I'd stayed family property. "There's more," she continued, voice gentle like she was delivering a terminal diagnosis. "The inside information about your employees, your contracts? It's coming from someone with family access to Sterling Enterprises systems." My hand stilled on the photographs. Sterling Enterprises. My father's company, where Nathan worked as executive vice president. My brother, who'd stood silent in the hallway while they erased me, now actively helping destroy what I'd built from their ashes. The investigator left more evidence, emails between Nathan and Richard discussing the Beverly problem, financial transfers routing through offshore accounts, a coordinated campaign to make me radioactive in the industry. My sin wasn't just rejecting Richard anymore, it was succeeding without them. Every triumph I'd achieved reflected their failure to break me, and that was unforgivable. The family that had declared me dead now wanted to make it literal, at least professionally. I called an emergency all-hands meeting the next morning, looking at the 48 employees who'd survived the poaching raids. Most were original hires, the ones who'd believed in the mission before we had prestigious clients or steady paychecks. Their faces showed the strain of uncertainty, of wondering if they'd bet their careers on a sinking ship. I owed them honesty, even if it meant admitting the weakness of having a vindictive family. "We're under coordinated attack," I began, voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. "By people who want to see us fail because our success threatens their worldview. They've taken our algorithms, our clients, our people. They've frozen our assets and manufactured investigations. By any reasonable measure, we should close our doors today." 48 faces stared back, waiting for the but. I wasn't sure I had one. Maria Rodriguez, one of my first hires, a single mother who'd been passed over for promotion at 3 different firms before joining us, stood up. With all due respect, Beverly, screw reasonable measures. When has anything about Sterling Innovations been reasonable? You hired me when I had an arrest record from a wrongful conviction. You promoted Kenji when he could barely speak English. You gave us all chances nobody else would. So they want a war? We've all been fighting wars our whole lives. At least now we know who the enemy is. One by one, others stood. Kenji, whose innovations had built half our proprietary systems. Sarah, who'd left a partner track position to join our uncertainty. Michael, recovering from addiction with 2 years clean and the best strategic mind I'd ever encountered. They weren't just employees anymore, they were believers in something bigger than paychecks. We stick together, Sarah said simply. Or we fall together. But we don't quit. But loyalty doesn't pay bills, and our runway was shrinking fast. I laid out the brutal math: 3 months of operating capital if we cut salaries in half, maybe 4 if we eliminated everything non-essential. Anyone who needs to leave for financial reasons, I'll write the best recommendation of your life. No judgment, only gratitude for what you've given. Nobody moved. Instead, Michael pulled out a spreadsheet he'd clearly been working on, showing how we could stretch resources to 6 months if we restructured as a worker cooperative, everyone taking equity in lieu of full salaries. The vote was unanimous. Sterling Innovations would survive or die as a collective, 48 middle fingers raised to everyone who'd tried to bury us. But even unity couldn't manufacture clients or unfreeze assets. I spent nights researching bankruptcy law, wondering if this was how my story ended, not with triumph but with 48 people who'd trusted me losing everything because I dared to build something without permission. The lowest point came at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, standing on the roof of our office building. Not to jump, though the thought flickered like a moth around flame, but to see the city lights and remember why I'd started this fight. Below me, Manhattan sprawled indifferent to my small tragedy, 8 million people with their own betrayals and dreams. I thought about calling Nathan, demanding to know how he could participate in my professional murder. But I knew the answer: I'd embarrassed the family by succeeding. This was correction, not cruelty, in their twisted logic. Maria found me there, somehow knowing where to look. My ex-husband tried to destroy me too, she said, joining me at the railing. Took my kids, my house, my reputation. Left me with nothing but rage and stubbornness. You know what I learned? Rock bottom's just another foundation to build on. And the buildings that start from the deepest foundations stand the tallest. We stood there until sunrise, 2 women who'd been betrayed by the people supposed to love us most, watching the city wake up to another day of possibilities. I wasn't alone, I realized. Not in the way that mattered. These 48 people weren't my family, but they were something maybe more important, fellow survivors who'd chosen to link their fate with mine. If I gave up now, I wasn't just failing myself but everyone who'd ever been told they didn't belong in the winner's circle. We pivot, I announced at the morning meeting, exhaustion making my voice raw. They've taken our current advantages, so we create new ones. We go where they can't follow, into territories they don't understand. Maria, remember that AI project you proposed last year? The one I said was too experimental? Time to experiment. The room erupted in determined energy, minds that had been playing defense suddenly unleashed on offense. We couldn't outspend our enemies, but we could out-innovate them. Every setback had taught us resilience, every betrayal had sharpened our edge. Sterling Innovations 2.0 would be different from the company I'd founded in anger. This version would be forged in solidarity tempered by shared struggle, and aimed like a guided missile at every comfortable assumption about how business should work. Richard Sterling and my family had made a crucial error. They'd assumed that destroying my resources would destroy me, not understanding that I'd been building without resources my entire adult life. Every attack had only stripped away what didn't matter, leaving the essential core. Brilliant people with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. We were dangerous in ways they couldn't comprehend, because we'd already survived our worst fears and found each other on the other side. But first, we had to not die. And that meant creating something so revolutionary that clients would brave any family pressure to work with us. It meant being so undeniably excellent that even coordination couldn't erase us. It meant taking the pain they'd inflicted and transforming it into fuel for a victory they'd never see coming. The girl who'd slept on park benches rather than apologize for her ambition was about to show them what happened when you backed a survivor into a corner. They wanted me dead? They were about to learn that some people are too stubborn to die, and some companies are too important to fail. The lawsuit came wrapped in legal language designed to intimidate, but beneath the jargon was simple extortion. Richard Sterling, through his web of shell companies, was suing me for theft of trade secrets, claiming our AI innovations were derived from Sterling Enterprises property. The fact that I'd never worked for my father's company, had built everything from scratch with my team, didn't matter. They had deeper pockets and meaner lawyers. This wasn't about winning. It was about bleeding us dry through legal fees. Ruth Goldman came recommended by another business owner Richard had tried to crush. 70 years old with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen every dirty trick in the corporate playbook, she reviewed our case with the intensity of a surgeon. "He's made mistakes," she said finally, tapping one manicured nail on a document. "These shell companies? The transfers between them violate about 6 different regulations. But proving it will cost more than you have." I appreciated her honesty even as it tasted like defeat. "Unless," she continued, "we find someone inside their organization willing to testify. Someone with access to communication showing intent to destroy rather than compete. Do you have anyone who might help?" I almost laughed. My family had made sure I had no one, had stripped away every connection that might have protected me. But Ruth's question planted a seed that grew in the dark of another sleepless night. The text came 2 weeks later from a number I didn't recognize. "It's Melissa. Can we meet? Somewhere they won't see." My sister, who'd chosen them over me 15 years ago, suddenly reaching out when I was at my weakest. Every instinct screamed trap, but desperation makes gamblers of us all. I agreed to meet at a diner in Queens, far from Manhattan's watching eyes, at 5 a.m. when even ambitious New Yorkers were still sleeping. She looked older, designer clothes unable to hide the exhaustion in her eyes. The artistic free spirit I'd known had been polished into a corporate wife, her creativity channeled into charity galas and interior decorating. "You look good," she said, voice catching. "Successful. I've been following your career." I waited, letting silence do the work questions couldn't. She'd requested this meeting, she could explain why. "I have recordings," she finally whispered, sliding a flash drive across the cracked Formica table. "Board meetings where Dad and Richard discussed destroying you. Emails between Nathan and their lawyers strategizing the lawsuit. Financial documents showing the bribes to your former clients." My hand hesitated over the drive. In my family, gifts always came with strings that strangled. Why? The question encompassed 15 years of silence, of choosing them, of standing by while they systematically tried to erase me. Melissa's eyes filled with tears that looked real, but I'd seen James fake emotion too convincingly to trust water and salt. Because I'd been dying inside since the day they threw you out. Because I married who they told me to marry and live in a house that feels like a prison and wake up every morning hating who I've become. She told me about her life, about the art career she'd abandoned for an investment banker who treated her like an accessory, about the children she was raising to continue cycles of emotional violence. "I thought choosing them meant safety," she confessed. "But all it meant was a prettier cage. When I saw what they were doing to you, again, I couldn't. Not this time. Take them down, Beverly. For both of us." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe that somewhere in the ruins of our family, sisterhood had survived. The drive contained everything Ruth said we needed: clear evidence of conspiracy, financial crimes that would trigger federal investigation, enough ammunition to turn defense into offense. But 15 years of betrayal had taught me that hope was just disappointment waiting to bloom. "What do you want in return?" "Nothing," she said, and that's when I knew it was a trap. In my experience, nobody helped for nothing. There was always a price, always an agenda, always the knife waiting for your back to turn. But I took the drive anyway, because what choice did I have? Sterling Innovations was weeks from bankruptcy, my employees were working for equity that might be worthless, and I was tired of playing defense against an enemy with unlimited resources. Ruth's eyes lit up when she reviewed the contents. "This is a smoking gun. Hell, this is a smoking arsenal. With this, we don't just defend, we countersue for racketeering." She immediately began preparing filings, subpoenas that would crack open Sterling Enterprises like a rotten egg. For the first time in months, I felt something adjacent to hope. Maybe Melissa had found courage in my example. Maybe family meant something after all. The hearing was set for a Tuesday that felt like Judgment Day. I dressed in my sharpest suit, Grandpa's watch gleaming like armor. My employees had pooled resources to hire a bus, determined to show solidarity. 48 people who believed in our mission enough to risk everything, sitting in those courthouse benches like my chosen family. Ruth had prepared meticulously, our counter case built on Melissa's evidence and weeks of connecting financial dots. The courtroom doors opened, and my past walked in like a parade of ghosts. My father, older but still radiating the cold authority that had terrorized my childhood. My mother, pearls gleaming against a black dress chosen to make her look sympathetic. Nathan, avoiding eye contact like a coward. Richard, smug in the knowledge that men like him always won. And Melissa, dressed like the perfect daughter, taking her seat with them instead of with me. "Your Honor," Richard's lawyer began, "we have a witness who can speak to Ms. Chen's pattern of corporate espionage and emotional instability." My blood turned to ice water as Melissa took the stand, her performance Oscar-worthy. The recordings? Edited to remove context, making innocent business discussions sound nefarious when played in reverse. The emails? Selectively chosen to paint me as the aggressor. The financial documents? Forgeries she claimed I'd created to frame my loving family. She was always jealous, Melissa testified, tears streaming down her face. Even as children, Beverly couldn't stand that we had what she wanted. She spent 15 years plotting revenge for imagined slights, building her company specifically to attack our family's business. We tried to reach out, to reconcile, but she's too consumed by hatred to see love when it's offered. Ruth objected, fought, presented our evidence, but the damage was done. Melissa had given them the one thing money couldn't buy, a sympathetic family member confirming their narrative. The judge's face showed the story he was writing in his head. Prodigal daughter too proud to come home, creating elaborate conspiracies to justify her bitterness. Richard's lawyer presented her collaboration as evidence of my manipulation, claiming I'd emotionally abused my younger sister into brief disloyalty before she came to her senses. During recess, I found Melissa in the bathroom, reapplying lipstick like she hadn't just committed fratricide in legal form. "How could you?" I asked, voice barely a whisper. She met my eyes in the mirror, and for just a moment, the mask slipped. "I have children, Beverly. They threatened to disinherit my kids if I didn't play along." "What would you have done?" "I would have protected you," I said, and meant it. Despite everything, despite 15 years of silence and abandonment, I would have protected my little sister. That's what family was supposed to mean. But she just shrugged, mask sliding back into place. "That's the difference between us. You think love conquers all. I know it doesn't even conquer trust funds." The judge dismissed our countersuit and ruled in Richard's favor, ordering damages that would destroy Sterling Innovations. Ruth promised appeals, but her eyes said what her words wouldn't: we'd lost. My employees sat stunned in those benches, watching their faith in meritocracy crumble. Maria found me in the courthouse bathroom, dry heaving into a toilet while my carefully constructed world imploded. "We'll figure something out," she promised, but even eternal optimists have limits. The walk back to our office felt like a funeral march, 48 people who'd believed in me now facing unemployment because I'd been stupid enough to trust blood again. The city that had once felt full of possibility now looked like a graveyard of ambitions, each skyscraper a tombstone for someone's dreams. That night, I stood on the office roof again, but this time the city lights looked like stars I'd never reach. Everyone had a breaking point, and I'd finally found mine. Not the first abandonment or the second or even the third, but this elaborate cruelty of hope offered and snatched away. My phone buzzed with messages from employees trying to stay positive, from Ruth discussing appeal strategies, from reporters who'd caught wind of the story. I turned it off, craving silence to match the emptiness inside. Maria found me again, because apparently that was her superpower. But this time she wasn't alone. Kenji, Sarah, Michael, and a dozen others had followed, carrying pizza and beer like provisions for a siege. "We're not leaving you alone tonight," Sarah announced, setting up an impromptu picnic on the roof. "And before you say you don't deserve us, just shut up and eat. Despair requires carbohydrates." They talked around me at first, sharing their own stories of failure and recovery. Kenji had been fired from 3 jobs for his accent before learning to code. Sarah had been told women couldn't handle strategic planning until she planned her way out of an abusive marriage. Michael shared how he'd lost everything to addiction, including a daughter who still wouldn't speak to him, but had rebuilt anyway because the alternative was dying. "You think you failed us," Michael said eventually, addressing the elephant on the roof. "But here's the thing, every single one of us has been where you are. Betrayed by people who should have protected us, told we didn't belong, knocked down so many times we stopped counting. You know what you did that nobody else ever did? You got back up and pulled others up with you. That's not failure, that's heroism." "Sterling Innovations isn't dead yet," Kenji added, laptop open to code he'd been writing. "Your sister gave them theatrical victory, but she also gave us information. Those recordings she played? I've been analyzing them. With the right algorithms, we can prove they were edited. More importantly, the AI platform we've been developing? It's quantum leaps ahead of anything Sterling Enterprises has. They can win lawsuits, but they can't win the future." One by one, my employees, these brilliant minds I'd tried to keep at arm's length, shared pieces of a plan. Use the forced downtime during appeals to perfect our AI platform. License it to companies outside Richard's influence. Build partnerships with international firms that didn't care about American family drama. Pivot from consulting to technology, because code didn't care about your last name. It was ambitious and desperate and exactly the kind of plan that only worked when you had nothing left to lose. "Why?" I asked finally, throat tight with emotions I'd spent years suppressing. "Why stay when you could work anywhere?" Maria smiled, the kind that came from hard-won wisdom. "Because you're the only CEO who ever saw us as more than our resumes. Because Sterling Innovations isn't just a company, it's proof that merit matters more than connections. And because honestly, we really want to see their faces when we win anyway." We stayed on that roof until dawn, planning resurrection while the city slept. Somewhere across town, my family was probably celebrating their victory, confident they'd finally put me back in my place. They didn't understand that some seeds grow best in darkness, that some people forge strength from suffering, that betrayal could become fuel if you burned hot enough. They'd taken everything they could see, but they couldn't take the one thing that mattered, the choice to continue. As the sun rose over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of possibility, I made a decision. Not just to fight or survive, but to transform. Sterling Innovations would become something beyond my original vengeful vision, beyond proof that I didn't need them. It would become proof that connection could exist without exploitation, that chosen family could heal what blood family had broken, that success tasted sweetest when shared with people who'd earned their seats at the table. The girl who'd trusted her sister with salvation had learned her final lesson about family betrayal. But the woman who'd found 48 reasons to continue on a rooftop at dawn? She was about to learn that the best revenge isn't success. It's success that lifts others, that creates what you needed when you had nothing, that builds bridges for everyone who's ever been told they'll never cross to the other side. My family thought they'd broken me. They'd actually just freed me to become what I was always meant to be, not alone, but undaunted. Not trusting, but trusted. Not family by blood, but family by choice and struggle, and the shared conviction that tomorrow could be different if we were brave enough to build it. 3 years later, at 35, I learned that success tastes different when it's seasoned with shared struggle. Sterling Innovations had died in that courtroom, but something better rose from its ashes. We'd reincorporated as Sterling AI, pivoting hard into artificial intelligence when the consulting world slammed doors in our faces. The office was smaller, a converted warehouse in Brooklyn instead of Manhattan steel and glass, but it hummed with the electricity of minds unleashed from traditional constraints. The breakthrough came, as breakthroughs often do, at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday. Maria and I were debugging code, running on coffee and determination, when the algorithm suddenly worked. Not just worked, but sang, predicting market patterns with accuracy that made current systems look like guesswork. Holy shit, Maria breathed, running the test again. Same results. We'd created something that could revolutionize predictive analytics, and we'd done it with a team of 48 people working for equity and dreams. Living on ramen reminded me of being 23, except this time I wasn't alone. We instituted communal dinners, everyone contributing what they could. Kenji made rice in a cooker he'd brought from home. Sarah brought vegetables from her garden. Michael, 2 years sober and counting, became our unofficial chef, turning random ingredients into meals that tasted like hope. We weren't just colleagues anymore, we were something startup culture tried to manufacture but couldn't, a genuine community. The first venture capital pitch was a disaster. Sandhill Road didn't know what to do with a CEO who'd been publicly destroyed by her own family, leading a team of misfits without Ivy League credentials. Interesting technology, they'd say, is already dismissing us, but we have concerns about leadership stability. Translation: damaged goods need not apply. 20 firms, 20 rejections, each one a reminder that reputation was currency I'd never recoup. Pedro Martinez changed everything. Our CFO, a man who'd fled El Salvador with nothing and built a career through sheer brilliance, made a decision that still makes me cry. My house is worth $400,000, he announced at our weekly meeting. I'm taking a mortgage to fund us through beta testing. The room erupted in protests, but Pedro held firm. You all risked everything on me when nobody else would hire a refugee. This is me returning the investment. Others followed. Kenji's savings. Sarah's inheritance from a grandmother. Michael's 401k, cashed out with penalties. By the end of the meeting, we'd raised $2 million from people who couldn't afford to lose it but couldn't afford not to believe. I tried to refuse, tried to protect them from my cursed touch, but Maria spoke for everyone. Beverly, you don't get to play martyr. We're not investing in you. We're investing in us. All of us. The beta test with Morrison Industries, a Fortune 1000 company with no connection to Richard's network, exceeded every projection. Our AI platform identified cost savings of $30 million in the first quarter, optimizing supply chains with precision that felt like magic. The CEO, Janet Morrison, called personally. I don't know what voodoo you're doing over there, but bottle it. We want exclusive rights. I countered with non-exclusive licensing that would let us scale. She agreed, and suddenly we had revenue. Word spread through Silicon Valley like wildfire, but quietly, in whispers between CTOs tired of overpaying for underperforming systems. Our client base grew organically, each success story bringing 3 more inquiries. We hired carefully, looking for brilliance overlooked by algorithms that favored pedigree over potential. The warehouse filled with languages, accents, stories of obstacles overcome. Sterling AI was becoming what I'd always envisioned, a meritocracy that actually meant it. The acquisition offer started when we hit $50 million in annual recurring revenue. Tech giants circled like sharks, smelling disruption they wanted to own or bury. Google's offer was generous. Amazon's was better. But Microsoft's came with something more valuable than money, the promise to keep our team intact, to let us operate as an independent division, to scale our vision instead of consuming it. Still, I hesitated. Trust was a luxury I couldn't afford, even with contracts. Take the deal, Ruth advised over wine, her legal opinion softened by friendship forged in battle. But structure it smart. Maintain controlling interest in the IP. Performance triggers that guarantee autonomy. And Beverly? Make sure your people are protected. Stock options that vest immediately. Severance packages that ensure nobody suffers if things go south. She paused, studying me. You've already won, you know. This is just choosing how to celebrate. The negotiation took months, every clause a small war against my paranoia. But Microsoft's team, led by a black woman CEO who'd fought her own battles up the ladder, understood what we were protecting. The final deal valued Sterling AI at $2 billion, with earnouts that could double that. More importantly, it guaranteed jobs for every employee, immediate vesting for all equity holders, and resources to scale globally. The signing day felt surreal. 48 people who'd risked everything were about to become millionaires. Pedro would retire his mortgage and then some. Maria could send her kids to any college they chose. Michael could afford the therapy that might reconcile him with his daughter. Kenji could bring his parents from Japan to live comfortably. Sarah could fund the women's shelter she'd dreamed of opening. Lives changed because they'd believed in each other when the world told them not to. But I'd learned to savor victories quietly, knowing the universe loved ironic timing. As my employees celebrated in our warehouse, champagne flowing like possibility, I stepped outside for air and perspective. Brooklyn sprawled before me, grittier than Manhattan but more honest. This borough knew about rebuilding, about communities that survived because they stood together. It felt like home in a way the Upper East Side never had. My phone buzzed with congratulations from industry peers, reporters seeking comments, competitors pretending they weren't bitter. I ignored them all, focusing instead on the group photo Maria was organizing inside. 48 faces glowing with triumph that belonged to them as much as me. No, more than me. I'd provided the spark, but they'd been the oxygen that turned ember into inferno. Later, alone in my apartment, I pulled out the letter from Grandpa Joe I'd never opened. His handwriting was shaky but clear. Beverly, your parents see strength as dominance, love as transaction. They're wrong. Real strength builds others up. Real love multiplies when shared. Don't let their smallness make you small. Build something magnificent, then share it with people who deserve you. Fresh tears for an old wound, but also gratitude for one person who'd seen me clearly. The next morning brought lawyers and contracts and the beautiful bureaucracy of making dreams legally binding. But it also brought something unexpected, an email from Nathan. Saw the news. Congratulations seem inadequate. I know you'll never forgive me, and I don't deserve forgiveness. Just wanted you to know that I see now what we lost when we lost you. Dad's empire is crumbling. Richard's in federal prison for the fraud you exposed. Mom takes anxiety medication to sleep. Melissa's divorced and lost custody due to her perjury. We destroyed ourselves trying to destroy you. You won by becoming everything we said you couldn't be. I read it twice, then deleted it. Some bridges, once burned, weren't meant for rebuilding. But I'd learned something more valuable than forgiveness: indifference. My family's implosion didn't bring satisfaction or sorrow, just a distant acknowledgement that actions had consequences. They'd chosen their path. I'd chosen mine. The difference was that I'd chosen to climb with others instead of climbing on others. The real revenge, I realized, wasn't in their failure but in my transformation. They'd thrown out a daughter who would have done anything for their approval. They'd created a woman who built an empire on merit, who turned outcasts into millionaires, who proved that family was about showing up when it mattered, not showing up in photos. Every employee who could now buy a house, send kids to college, or just breathe without financial fear. That was revenge multiplied by 48. Sterling AI's technology would go on to save companies billions, optimize systems that reduced waste, create efficiencies that mattered. But its real legacy was simpler: proof that a group of people with nothing in common except rejection could build something worth $2 billion. Proof that talent existed everywhere if you looked past traditional markers. Proof that the best companies were families you chose, not inherited. The night of the acquisition closing, we held one last dinner in the warehouse. No catering, just our traditional potluck multiplied by newfound wealth. Pedro brought champagne that cost more than my first car. Sarah made her grandmother's pie recipe. Michael cooked enough to feed an army, sober and smiling and whole. Kenji's parents flew in from Japan, bowing deeply to each employee for taking care of their son. Maria's children ran between tables, the future we'd all invested in. To the orphans who built an empire, I toasted, Grandpa's watch catching the light. To the families we found when blood failed us. To proving that rejection is just redirection, that failure is just foundation, that the only permission you need to succeed is your own. 48 glasses raised, 48 voices cheering, 48 hearts that had chosen connection over isolation. But life wasn't done with its ironies. Because just as I'd learned to build without needing my family's validation, just as I'd found my place among chosen people who'd chosen me back, just as success had transformed from revenge to purpose, my phone lit up with a text that proved some patterns never die. The woman who'd declared me dead 15 years ago had suddenly remembered I existed, and all it had taken was $2 billion and a Fortune 500 announcement to resurrect her maternal instincts. The real test wasn't in the rising. It was in what you did when the ghosts you'd outgrown came calling, pretending they'd been cheering for you all along. The Fortune 500 announcement hit the business world like a meteor. At 38, I wasn't just the youngest female CEO on the list, I was leading a company that had gone from bankruptcy's edge to billions in valuation in 3 years. The Wall Street Journal ran a feature with the headline, "From Ashes to AI, the Beverly Chin Story." Forbes put me on their cover under the Revenge of the Rejected. Every major outlet wanted the exclusive on how a woman disowned by her family had built an empire from exile. I gave exactly one interview, to a tech journalist who'd covered Sterling AI since our warehouse days. "Success is sweeter when shared," I told her, deflecting credit to my team at every turn. The photo shoot happened in our original Brooklyn space, now a museum to our journey, with all 48 original employees present. We were a Fortune 500 company, but we hadn't forgotten the ramen dinners and rooftop despair that forged us. Then came the text that shattered my morning coffee ritual. The number wasn't saved, but I recognized it like a scar recognizes the knife that made it. "Beverly, darling, it's Mom. Saw you in Forbes. So proud." 15 years of silence broken by 11 words dripping with audacity. My phone slipped from nerveless fingers, coffee spreading across my desk like spilled blood. The mother who'd removed my photos while I watched, who'd chosen appearances over her daughter, suddenly remembered my existence. Before I could process the first violation, my phone exploded with family contact. Voicemails from my father, his voice carrying that same commanding tone that once made me small. "Beverly, it's time to put the past behind us. Blood is thicker than water, after all. Your mother and I want to discuss your future with Sterling Enterprises. Call me." As if I were still 23 and desperate for his approval. As if Sterling AI needed his failing construction empire. Nathan's email came with attachments, spreadsheets, and projections like we were colleagues instead of Cain and Abel. "Sis, congratulations on the Fortune 500. I've been following your success and have some ideas about synergies between our companies. Let's grab coffee and discuss combining our strengths. Family businesses are the strongest businesses." The casual erasure of his betrayal, the assumption that success had induced amnesia, made me laugh with the bitter edge of hysteria. Melissa's message was a masterpiece of manipulation, accompanied by recent photos of her children I'd never met. "Beverly, my divorce was finalized last year, and I've been doing a lot of therapy about our family dynamics. I realize now how wrongly I acted. My kids deserve to know their aunt, especially now that you're such an inspiration. Can we start over? For their sake? Using children as emotional leverage was creative, I'd give her that. Evil, but creative. The investigative reporter in me couldn't resist digging into what had prompted this sudden familiar awakening. It didn't take long to find. Sterling Enterprises was hemorrhaging money, over-leveraged in commercial real estate as remote work emptied office buildings. My father had personally guaranteed loans worth hundreds of millions. Richard's imprisonment had triggered investigations into their entire network. Nathan's division was facing bankruptcy. Melissa's divorce had left her without access to her ex-husband's wealth. The family that had thrown me away was drowning, and I looked like a life raft. "They're circling because they smell money," Maria observed over lunch, her protective instincts sharp as ever. "What are you going to do?" I'd been asking myself the same question since the first text. The wounded 23-year-old in me wanted to respond, to show them what they'd missed, to extract apologies and watch them grovel. But the 38-year-old CEO who'd learned that family was action, not blood, felt only exhausted amusement at their transparent greed. "I'm going to give them what they want," I decided, watching Maria's eyes widen. "A meeting. Let them make their pitch. Let them show me exactly who they still are. And then I'm going to show them exactly who I've become." It was petty, perhaps, but 15 years of exile had earned me one theatrical confrontation. Besides, I'd learned that the best revenges were served with documentation. The meeting was arranged for the old family estate in Connecticut, the same house where they'd declared me dead. I insisted on that location, wanted them to remember their words in the space where they'd spoken them. My legal team tried to talk me out of going alone, but this was personal archaeology. I needed to excavate these ghosts without witnesses who might soften my resolve. The house looked smaller than memory painted it, older, like prosperity had been quietly foreclosing for years. My mother answered the door in the same pearls she'd worn to every significant event, but they couldn't disguise the new lines around her eyes, the tremor in her hands. "Beverly," she breathed, reaching out as if to hug me. I stepped back, maintaining professional distance. "Mrs. Sterling," I replied, watching her flinch at the formality. They'd assembled in the same living room where they'd banished me, arranged like a tableau of false remorse. My father, his commanding presence diminished by age and poor decisions. Nathan, soft around the middle, wearing desperation like cologne. Melissa, designer clothes unable to hide the hollow defeat in her eyes. They looked like what they were, people who'd bet on the wrong horse and were scrambling to change their wager. "Thank you for coming," my father began, still trying to run the meeting like a board he controlled. "We've all had time to reflect on past misunderstandings." Misunderstandings. 15 years of exile reduced to a miscommunication. Your success has shown us that perhaps we were hasty in our judgment. Family should stick together, especially in difficult times. I let him talk, cataloging every manipulation, every revision of history, every assumption that I was still the daughter desperate for their love. Nathan pitched his business proposal, full of buzzwords he didn't understand and synergies that existed only in his desperation. Melissa cried pretty tears about her children needing family, about second chances and therapeutic growth. My mother spoke about legacy, about keeping wealth in the family, about grandchildren who deserved inheritance. When they finished, I pulled out a folder I'd prepared with Ruth's help. "Before we discuss any future relationship, let's clarify our past one." I laid out the documents like tarot cards predicting their doom. The security footage of them removing my photos. The emails between Nathan and Richard planning my destruction. The court transcripts of Melissa's perjury. The financial records showing how they'd tried to bankrupt my company. "This is who you are. Who you've always been. The only thing that's changed is my net worth." The room erupted in deflections and denials, but I wasn't finished. "However, I'm willing to help." Their faces lit with the greed I'd expected. "Sterling Enterprises needs capital to avoid bankruptcy. I'm prepared to provide it." My father leaned forward, already calculating how to manipulate this windfall. But there are conditions. I pulled out the purchase agreement Ruth had drawn up. I'll buy Sterling Enterprises. All of it. The debt, the assets, everything. Including this house. The number I offered was fair, would clear their debts and leave them comfortable if not wealthy. But it came with stipulations that made my father's face purple with rage. Complete divestment. No involvement in operations. No Sterling family member could ever work for or with the company. And the house would be converted into a scholarship foundation for young women escaping toxic families. You're trying to erase us, my mother gasped, pearls clutched like prayer beads. I smiled, the one I'd learned in boardrooms where sharks swam in suits. No. You erased me, remember? I'm just honoring your wishes. You declared me dead. This is your estate sale. How can you do this to your family? Nathan demanded, the irony apparently lost on him. We're your blood. The word hung between us like an indictment. Blood. The substance they'd weaponized, commodified, and ultimately diluted until it meant nothing. You know what I learned when you helped Richard try to destroy me? I asked conversationally. Family isn't blood. Family is showing up. Family is choosing each other every day. Family is 48 people risking everything on a rooftop at dawn. You're not my family. You're just people I used to know. Melissa made one last play, pushing forward photos of her children. Their innocence in this. Don't punish them for our mistakes. I looked at the photos, seeing my own eyes in their faces, and felt nothing. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm offering you a clean exit from financial ruin. Take it or leave it. But decide quickly. This offer expires when I walk out that door. The argument that erupted showed me everything. My father raged about rights and respect. My mother wept about tradition and appearances. Nathan threatened lawsuits he couldn't afford. Melissa begged for modifications that would let her benefit. They were exactly who they'd always been, people who saw relationships as transactions, love as leverage, family as a word to manipulate rather than a bond to honor. I stood to leave, gathering my documents with the efficiency of someone who'd wasted enough time on lost causes. Wait, my father commanded, but the voice that had once controlled me now bounced off like rain on armor. The offer stands for 24 hours. Ruth Goldman has full authority to negotiate. Or don't, and let Sterling Enterprises fall. Either way, I'm done here. You'll regret this, my mother called after me, finding her voice in venom. When you're old and alone, you'll regret choosing money over family. I turned at the door, looking back at the people who'd shaped me through their failures. I'm not alone. I have family. Real family. People who loved me when I had nothing, who stood by me when the world tried to break us, who celebrate my success without asking for percentages. You taught me that blood means nothing. Thank you for that lesson. Security escorted them out the same way they'd escorted me 15 years ago, through the back exit like unwanted deliveries. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, especially my father, whose final words were threats about legal action and family curses. But they took the deal, of course. Greed won over pride, as I'd known it would. Sterling Enterprises became part of Sterling AI, restructured and repurposed for actual innovation instead of nepotistic wealth hoarding. The house transformation began immediately. Construction crews gutted rooms that had hosted decades of conditional love, replacing them with dormitories and classrooms and counseling spaces. The Sterling Foundation for Women's Independence would provide full scholarships, living expenses, and mentorship for young women escaping families that demanded they choose between authenticity and acceptance. The first recipient was a 22-year-old computer science major whose parents had disowned her for refusing an arranged marriage. The circle closed with different choices. The aftermath of the confrontation left me surprisingly empty. I'd spent 15 years imagining the moment I'd face them again, scripting speeches about their cruelty and my triumph. But standing in that room, watching them scramble for my money while refusing to acknowledge their betrayal, I'd felt nothing but tired pity. They were small people who'd stayed small, while I'd been forced to grow beyond their limitations. There was no satisfaction in defeating opponents who'd already defeated themselves. Was it worth it? Maria asked over wine a week later, after the papers were signed and Sterling Enterprises officially absorbed. Did you get what you needed? I considered the question, rolling Grandpa Joe's watch between my fingers. What had I needed? Apologies that would never come? Love that had never existed? Recognition from people whose approval I'd outgrown? No. What I'd needed was to see them clearly, without the haze of childhood hope or adult anger. And I had. I got freedom, I said finally. Freedom from wondering if they'd change. Freedom from the weight of their expectations. Freedom to define family on my terms. Maria raised her glass, understanding in her eyes. She'd fought her own battles with blood that failed her, had chosen building over bitterness. We drank to freedom, to chosen families, to the beautiful audacity of becoming everything they said we couldn't be. The Sterling Foundation's first cohort arrived in September, 20 young women with stories that echoed mine in different keys. Disowned for choosing careers over arranged marriages, for refusing to hide their sexuality, for insisting their dreams mattered more than family reputation. They lived in the house that had once expelled me, learned in rooms where conditional love had ruled, and slowly discovered what I'd learned in Brooklyn warehouses. That chosen family could heal what blood family broke. I taught a monthly seminar, sharing not just business strategy but survival tactics for hearts that had been declared dead by people who should have protected them. The pain doesn't disappear, I told them honestly. It transforms. You can let it make you bitter, or you can let it make you better. You can spend your life trying to prove them wrong, or you can focus on proving yourself right. The choice is yours, but I recommend the second option. It's more fun. Michael finally reconciled with his daughter, using his fortune to fund her medical school dreams while respecting her boundaries about rebuilding slowly. Kenji's parents moved to New York, proud grandparents who bowed to their son's chosen family with the respect blood had earned through action. Pedro retired to travel with his wife, sending postcards from countries he'd only dreamed of visiting. Sarah opened 3 women's shelters, creating the safe spaces she'd needed when escaping her marriage. They were all building legacies of healing, proof that success shared multiplied rather than divided. Sterling AI continued to grow, our technology revolutionizing industries while our hiring practices revolutionized workplaces. We became known as the company that found genius in unexpected places, that turned rejection into recruitment opportunities. Our employee roster read like stories of resilience, former addicts, single mothers, immigrants, anyone who'd been told they didn't belong in corner offices. They belonged with us, where merit mattered more than pedigree. A year after the Fortune 500 announcement, another text arrived from my mother. Just her name on my screen, no message, like she'd typed and deleted 100 times before sending nothing. I stared at it for a moment, feeling the ghost of the daughter who would have responded immediately, desperately, hopefully. Then I deleted it without reading, without anger, without anything but the mild indifference you'd give a wrong number. She wasn't my mother anymore. She was just someone who'd taught me, through her failures, how to mother myself. The real lesson wasn't about revenge or success or proving anyone wrong. It was simpler and harder. You can't make people love you correctly, but you can choose to love yourself anyway. You can't make family mean what it should, but you can create your own definitions. You can't undo betrayal, but you can decide it won't define your capacity to trust. The people who declared me dead had given me the gift of resurrection on my own terms. I'd died as Beverly Sterling, desperate for approval that would never come. I'd risen as Beverly Chen, surrounded by people who'd earned their place in my life through showing up when it mattered. They say success is the best revenge, I told the Sterling Foundation graduates at their first commencement. But they're wrong. The best revenge is success that heals, that helps, that proves love multiplies when shared with people who deserve it. The best revenge is building the family you needed when you had none. The best revenge is becoming so whole that the holes they left don't hurt anymore. You're not here because your families failed you. You're here because you refused to fail yourselves. The applause was thunderous, 20 young women who understood that sometimes the family that throws you away is just clearing space for the family you're meant to find. As I watched them celebrate, surrounded by chosen sisters and mentors who'd walked similar paths, I thought about the 23-year-old girl standing on a sidewalk with a duffel bag and a broken heart. She'd thought it was the end. She couldn't have imagined it was actually the beginning of everything that mattered. Looking back, I wouldn't change anything. Not the exile, not the betrayals, not the nights on rooftops contemplating whether to continue. Every wound had taught me something. Every scar was proof of survival. Every person who'd failed me had pushed me toward the people who wouldn't. The parents who'd declared me dead at 23 had been right about one thing: that girl was gone. But what had risen from her ashes was worth the burning. They declared me dead at 23. At 39, I've never been more alive. Sometimes the family that throws you away just clears space for the family you're meant to find. Sometimes rejection is redirection. Sometimes the best thing that can happen is losing everything you thought you needed, because only then can you discover what you actually deserve. And what I deserved, what we all deserve, is love that doesn't come with price tags or conditions or escape clauses. Love that shows up at dawn on rooftops with pizza and hope. Love that risks everything on belief in better. Love that builds empires not for revenge, but for the revolutionary idea that chosen family can heal any wound that blood family inflicts. The Fortune 500 list was nice. The billions were useful. But the real fortune was 48 people who'd chosen to rise together, hundreds more who'd joined our mission, and 20 young women learning that being declared dead by family wasn't a sentence but a second chance. My mother had texted because she saw my success. But success wasn't the money or the magazine covers. Success was deleting her message without a second thought, then looking around a room full of people who'd loved me when I had nothing and knowing I was finally, truly, completely home. What's your biggest lesson about chosen family versus blood family? Have you ever had to walk away from toxic relationships to build something better? Share your stories in the comments below, because every testimony of survival helps someone else believe they can make it too. If this story resonated with your journey of choosing yourself when others demanded you choose them, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of people who turned rejection into resurrection. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that sometimes the best families are the ones we build ourselves. Thank you for being part of this chosen family of survivors and thrivers. Until next time, remember, you don't need anyone's permission to become everything you're meant to be. The only approval that matters is your own.